In my world, the physiology is smarter than any practitioner, and the body doesn't do anything by accident. My thought process is, because I've spent a lot of time in an EE system myself, and I know other people who have, and I've spoken to them. You mentioned journaling, and you mentioned how you were not only in an optimal environment, but what are you doing when you're journaling? You're kind of unzipping the inner world of what's going on with you. So another thing that we could talk about is sometimes people have to deal with their non-physical stuff, their psycho-emotional aspects to their reality.
All right, you are tuned into Everything's Energy Show, where we talk about everything is actually energy, from our head to our toes, down south, all the way north. And I have two lovely co-hosts with me, or hosts, Marino and Roland. And today our discussion is going to be about something that everyone should really know about, and really no one knows enough about: HRV, heart rate variability. And Roland, you're an expert in HRV. Can you tell us why that's important to monitor, and what exactly is HRV?
So if anyone wears a Whoop or an Oura ring, they'll know that HRV is this number that's typically correlated with recovery status or your readiness for the day. Heart rate variability is essentially looking at how your nervous system is operating, your physiology, by the pattern or the rhythm of your heart rate. So each time there's a breath in, there's a breath out, there's a yin and a yang aspect to your nervous system, which is represented as the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. Can I give people a little background and understanding of how the nervous system works and what it looks like?
I like your yin yang drop there as that balance, that active and passive, but maybe go a little deeper into sympathetic and parasympathetic.
Okay. So there's your central nervous system, which is your brain and spinal cord. That's the command center. It's the CPU of the body. The brain is always looking for all the different inputs in your external reality to appropriately coordinate the internal responses. So if you need to upregulate your stress response, it does so, and it can downregulate your stress response. So that's your central nervous system. There's your peripheral nervous system, which is all the nerves that go out to your muscles, your arms, your legs. So it moves you, but there's a division called your autonomic nervous system, which is where the sympathetic and the parasympathetic come in. The sympathetic is the fight or flight system. So it is that because it is sympathetic to the needs of your body. When you go from a lying position to standing up, if your blood pressure doesn't go up, you might get dizzy and pass out. So that's where a sympathetic nervous system response is really good. The parasympathetic's job is to bring you back down to a state of regulation, or homeostasis, we like to call in the clinical world, so your body doesn't need to always be stressed in order to get through the day. Most people have this wrong because they think sympathetic is associated with bad, parasympathetic is associated with good. If you had pure parasympathetic, you and the couch would just be one. There would be no reason to do anything because you would just exist in this Zen-like state all the time, which is cool in a monastery, not necessarily good if you want to live as a normal human in 3D reality. Yeah. So the idea of how the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system resonate to HRV and optimal health is you want the appropriate coordination for how it's able to regulate your body physiologically.
It's fascinating. And so there's a lot of different ways people can measure these. I guess the most are common are wearables, right? Like, can you dive into how someone might monitor this?
So this might trigger some people, but that's okay because it's objective science.
Trigger alert.
Trigger alert. Wearable HRV isn't real HRV. So what these devices are doing is they're measuring your pulse. They're running the pulse rhythm based upon your heart rate and beats per minute through an algorithm, because each beat, technically, where the variability comes from in heart rate variability is your heart should not be like a metronome. You know what a metronome is on a piano to keep time? If your heart's like a metronome, that's a very bad presentation physiologically. Those are the people who are close to cardiac events because there's no variability left in their heart rhythm. Their body's locked in place because the body's so stressed it doesn't have adaptability or bandwidth.
Makes sense.
So what the devices are looking at is they're looking at your pulse rhythm, and a Whoop or an Oura ring will put it through a proprietary algorithm, and they'll give you a number, 46, 57, 62. It's a nothing. It's a fairy dust, kind of, in terms of its scientific representation, but it will correlate with true HRV, which can only come from using a chest strap, because HRV isn't what's called a time domain. It's not measuring the number of beats. It's a frequency domain, because the parasympathetic system resonates with high frequency heart rate. So the emittance off of the what's called the sinus node, this is very technical, maybe boring, but the sinus node in the heart emits a high frequency waveform of energy every time it beats. The sympathetic is associated with low frequency. So when someone's got high vibes, they got more parasympathetic recruitment and activity, maybe. But what you're measuring is the relationship between the two of them to get a sense of how well your nervous system is operating your physiology, and if it's a healthful presentation of representation or if it's a disease or a pathological presentation. And we can talk about how that correlates with all different kinds of health conditions.
Well, maybe dive into to that after. I want to actually bring up the Whoop because Marino is wearing a Whoop. If anyone from Whoop wants to send us free ones, go for it. You actually have a story about both the EE system and the Whoop, which I thought was fascinating, and I'd love for you to tell that story.
Yeah, so often when I meet people, they kind of want devices that measure the system and its effects, and it's kind of challenging. But one of the things that I always like to refer to was like my experience that I had when I came into a system, which was my first overnight. I was flying to the East Coast, so I like lost a bunch of hours, and I was like sleep deprived, and I pulled up at like 3%. So it's at my Whoop. And in a single night with less than 7 hours, it was like, I don't know, like 6 hours and 49 minutes or something like that, if I recall correctly. I had jumped from 3% recovery to a 96, which has never happened. Usually when you're sleep deprived, it takes you a couple of days of recovering that sleep debt to get back up into the green. Has always been that way. I've never jumped from the red to the green in a single night. So that's like, one metric that I was able to use. It's by proxy, right? But in a sense, it kind of gives us some light into the effects of the system. But Roland, I wanted to ask you, even though it's not an accurate measurement, is there value in the correlation between increases and decreases? So like maybe I don't know what exactly the measurements are, but I can see that there was a 30% or 40% increase in my HRV. Is that like a valuable thing to utilize?
Absolutely. Just because I say it's not true HRV, it doesn't mean it's a meaningless metric.
Yeah.
It is correlative, as long as the algorithm is good, which I know that they are good because they've probably put millions of dollars into researching not only the algorithm, but the ability to sensitively gather the data from the device. And I've done some stuff where I've correlated real HRV with wearable or wrist clips. It's called pulse analysis. So having that representation is going to be absolutely validating the fact that your HRV did jump from your experience in the system.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just we can't represent that, say, if we wanted to do a study or represent specific data as it correlates with someone's physical changes being in a system, which we have done.
That makes sense. And what system did you go to when you were doing your little metric there?
Emily Graves.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
fair enough. It was a 24-unit system?
Yeah, it was a 24-unit system.
We'll just say it was a 24-unit system. All right. Yeah. So now, Roland, actually, you did an HRV study inside a 48-unit here in Las Vegas. And so you were talking about some of the health metrics that HRV could be beneficial in monitoring. Maybe you want to start with what the metrics should be and where they actually went to start, and then discuss some of that.
Yeah. So I often get asked this question, or people want to discuss what the optimal HRV is. There's no such thing as optimal. It's individuated. It's like saying who has a better thumbprint. You can't really compare them. You can just talk about the subtle differences because HRV is truly unique because your state of regulation, how your physiology operates, is entirely a one of one. If that makes sense. So you can't have an ideal that you're trying to get to. You can just have an optimal state of regulation. The general sense of a healthy person will have a high amount of sympathetic and parasympathetic activity available to them. Mm-hmm. Elite people, we're talking Olympians, Navy SEALs, deep sea divers. These are people who have an incredibly powerful parasympathetic system and can downregulate their sympathetic system instantaneously. I've actually have a good friend who works in the NHL, and he always archetypally analyzes a lot of the athletes he looks at. And he said, there are the sympathetically wired guys. These are the twitchy people, the ones who they don't need caffeine to get all upregulated. They have a really good ability to upregulate the release of adrenaline and cortisol. And providing that they're healthy, that's an okay pattern. I wanted to actually add to Marino's story. The fact that you jumped from a 3% to a 90 plus shows that your physiology, although was severely stressed, your recovery capacity meant that that wasn't something that was detrimental to you in the long run. Mm-hmm. You were able to recover quite quickly. The people that we saw were not that. So there is a correlation. If you have a downregulated parasympathetic system, what that means for your physiology is you have the inability to heal. to some degree. You have a recovery capacity diminishment. So what these people have as a presentation is they have a very low amount of vagal tone, low amount of high frequency, and they have a either very high or a weakened sympathetic system, which is a different presentation. Most of the people we saw who had these kinds of presentations also had correlations of, I don't want to divulge too much information, but they're physiologic presentations where as a clinician, I would go, this is someone who's not on the path to health. This is someone who's struggling to recover, and their body is in a bit of a spiral of becoming ill. So that's what we saw as a baseline with a lot of people that we measure. And fundamentally, because I'm a clinician, I see that more often than not, than I see the freak athletes.
Yeah. So what are some things that people can do then to regulate their nervous system and kind of increase their capacity to heal?
Outside the EE system, like day-to-day things.
Like,
It's an amazing question, because the most obvious thing that I've started to elucidate with people is figuring out how they breathe. And this is an interesting thing. As we're doing this conversation right now, if you find yourself involuntarily holding your breath, believe it or not, that's a sympathetic stress response. Mm-hmm. Most people, and I've noticed this about myself because I've become very self-aware of how I'm regulating my breathing pattern, I hold my breath when I'm about to do something that involves a lot of focus. But if people are doing that all the time, they're basically wiring their neurology to upregulate sympathetic tone all the time. And if they're chronically being engaged, they're doubling down on that to the point where that's becoming their way of engaging with reality. Mm-hmm. So the first thing is learn to breathe. Every breath in is sympathetic. Every breath out is parasympathetic. Your mom talks about this all the time.
Everything's breath.
Everything is breath. She said, God's just a breath away. So focusing on regulating your breathing rhythms and really focusing on long out breaths. There's a process where I take people through where they do a 3 or 4 second inhalation, a 3 or 4 second hold, and an 8 second exhalation. Because when you drag out the exhalation, that's the parasympathetic regulation in the breath. That's the first thing. The second thing is regulating your circadian rhythm. So the human body operates on this rhythmic 24-hour cycle that is determined by light and light signatures. The reason that we're energetic in the morning is morning sun hits our skin and hits our eyes. The light energy, the photons, get into the brain, and they stimulate the brain to essentially wake the physiology up and coordinate all of the physiologic processes that are determined by the morning time. Raise cortisol, get adrenaline going, raise blood sugar, start the hormone release, all of those things.
Stop melatonin.
Exactly. Because you want to be wakeful in the morning, but the counter-regulatory side of the equation is true in the evening when you want to block excessive amounts of artificial light, because evening light exposure is correlated with lower HRV. I had a pro hockey player I was trying to counsel with, and I got him a pair of these blue blocking glasses because he was watching The Office in his computer at 2 a.m. in his bed, and he's wondering why his HRV was so crap. The first night he put it on, he had something similar, not quite as massive as a bump as you did, but he had a massive jump in his recovery status because his eyes weren't getting blue light at 2 a.m. when he should be sleeping and actually recovering. So the second thing is regulating the circadian rhythm. Really quickly, I'll go through a couple others. 3 is touching the earth. And then moving the body, eating well, and prioritizing sleep. Those are the 6 things immediately. If someone starts to focus on those over the course of a week, a few weeks, a couple months, they should likely see positive trends in their HRV if they are wearing something like a Whoop or an Oura ring, because one data point doesn't make a trend. You want to see things going up over the course of time.
Yeah, Whoop allows you to kind of journal your activities, and it tries to find correlations between your behavior and your HRV. And for me, something that really affected my HRV was journaling. But part of that was the fact that I wasn't on a screen at night. So an hour before going to bed, I'm sitting there journaling. I'm just using a pen and paper. And so it goes back to not staring at my phone or looking at a screen an hour before I go to bed. So between that and also just spending some time kind of thinking through my day and addressing things for the next day, I think all correlated towards that.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of research on blue light affecting, I think it's melatonin, and basically stopping you from being able to fall asleep. You're literally, it's like, oh, I'm awake. And then you're like, oh, I want to fall asleep. But yet you're staring at your phone or your laptop or your TV and you're wondering, why am I not sleeping? Well, it's literally the blue light. Yeah. So Roland, did you have any actual, we did the study here with the 48 unit. Did you have a percentile study of the increase or I should say optimization of HRV?
So because I couldn't give it a baseline number, I couldn't calculate a percentage increase. So what I did was a regulation state analysis. So looking at someone's overall fitness score, so that the device I have gives you a baseline score of your overall vitality based upon how your nervous system is regulating itself. So it gives you the amount of energy the body has and the amount of adaptability the body has as an assessment of how it determines that. So what I saw by and large of the 25 people, if I remember correctly.
We had 2 drop out.
We had 2 drop out, 27, yes. So we had the 25 people, 21 of them definitively had an increase in their overall fitness score. To me, that's a correlation between health status.
Yeah.
And the regulation state change on average that I saw, because most people were in the negative parasympathetic zone, I either saw an increase in parasympathetic activity coupled with a downregulation of sympathetic, or I saw a stabilization of parasympathetic with a downregulation of sympathetic. Both are fancy ways of saying the person got more chill or the person got less stressed. Now,
we could all use more chill.
We could all use some more chill. Paradoxically, there were a couple people who actually went the wrong way.
A couple people,
3 specifically.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't say the wrong way. Their system chose to regulate itself differently. And I've actually spent a lot of time thinking about this because in my world, the physiology is smarter than any practitioner and the body doesn't do anything by accident. My thought process is, because I've spent a lot of time in an EE system myself, and I know other people who have, and I've spoken to them. You mentioned journaling, and you mentioned how you were not only in an optimal environment, but what are you doing when you're journaling? You're kind of unzipping the inner world of what's going on with you. So another thing that we could talk about is sometimes people have to deal with their non-physical stuff, their psycho-emotional aspects to their reality.
The inner work, yeah.
With this study, we put a bunch of perfect strangers in a room together.
And not optimal sleeping conditions either, yeah.
In reclining chairs and blow-up mattresses. And we did not have the ability to control what they did the entire day prior to coming to the system. So we had a lot of confounding variables that we couldn't account for.
I actually remember seeing almost like we were leaving and almost everyone was on their phone or talking to the person next to him. Was one or the other.
And, you know, I was doing initial and follow-up measurements. If I really wanted to be scientifically optimal, I would have restricted the variables, but we were asking a lot of people in the first place. They were donating their time. They got something from it, but it was, you know. No,
telling people to take they can't use their phone is like telling a crackhead that they can't do crack. I mean, it's such an addictive thing. There's literally studies on that. It's like literally one of the most addictive things in the world.
Well, the phone is not a separate thing from us. It's now an extension of us. That's how I look at it.
We're at that point, yeah.
Yes. But I was asking myself, why would someone go the wrong way? Because the assumption should be going in a system should make everything better all the time. Being a clinician for many years, you start to realize the more you learn things, the more you don't know a lot. Because you're being humbled by the fact that your assumptions were actually leading you down a wrong path. One aspect to the process of healing is sometimes things have to get worse before they get better. Have you guys ever done a parasite cleanse before?
I mean, yeah, and it involved drinking like a lot of green juice. Some different. It was definitely not comfortable. You felt better afterwards, yeah.
But the first couple days, did you not feel terrible?
I felt really low energy.
Exactly. So that's not an accident because in some scenarios when you're trying to treat the body, there can be something called a die-off reaction when you're trying to kill a parasite. If you're killing things, there's not only the awareness of these creatures knowing that their life is imminently over inside of your system, but your immune system's becoming aware of it. There's die-off metabolites and various inflammatory insults. And the person experiences that as I'm low energy, my mood's dysregulated, I want to lie on the couch and watch Netflix because your body wants to push you into a parasympathetic state, but it can't because it doesn't have enough energy yet. So what I am actually thinking is happening for some people is being in a system is actually activating the response in the body to initiate the healing cycle, which is preceded by a negative physiologic response sometimes based upon who the person is and what they're suffering with. One person broke out into a full-blown herpes simplex, a cold sore.
Yeah.
So why would that happen? If the body has enough energy to heal, it's going to present the symptoms before it actually pulls the thing out of your physiology that's silently stuck there. And as an HRV analysis, you see that as the person getting more physically stressed but it's actually a good thing because theoretically it's initiating the cycle of healing. But sometimes, as I said, things get worse before they get better.
It's like the setback for the comeback.
Exactly. Healing is not a linear straight line. It's this
Mostly
cluster
nothing
mess of God knows what.
Well, to your point on, every person is very unique. So it's funny that you bring up that you can't like give it a score because everyone's so unique. Every body is unique. Every person has been through a unique experience here on Earth. You have no idea what environment they grew up in, they live in now. So it's always interesting and fascinating to hear about this topic. Is there anything you guys want to wrap up with? Because I want to keep this episode a little shorter.
I'll leave it to you guys to figure anything out first, and I can just kind of end on some final stuff with HRV.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot, and we gave people a lot of takeaway knowledge. I think that's
I would say one thing is if you want to have one variable in your life that you can use as a way to see if your system's being optimally regulated or if you're pushing it a little bit too far or you're in need of recovery rather, HRV is the one clinical tool that is assessing everything but making no claims about anything. That's why I love it as a clinical tool. It's objective, but it doesn't have to allude to anything specifically for the person, but it's a good way of just keeping tabs on yourself and your body.
That's a great wrap up. That's fascinating. Thank you guys.